Hello, welcome to this new episode of the FinTech Scotland podcast. I'm your host, Mikael, and today we are going to speak about AI, and more specifically about Agentic AI and its potential to transform the financial services industry. We were lucky to be at Money 2020 this year in June in Amsterdam, and the topic of conversation that came back again and again was Agentic AI. So I thought, let's do a podcast today. We'll discuss whether Agentic AI is paving the way for smarter, more connected financial ecosystem, the opportunities it brings, but also some of the regulatory hurdles that we might encounter, and also explore the need for collaboration between academia, industry, policymakers to ensure that this innovation is done responsibly. As always, I'm joined by a great panel of experts. Some of them have been with us before, so you might recognize some faces or names. They're real experts, and I'm really excited to hear what they have to say today. First of all, we've got Alexandra Birch, reader in natural language processing at the University of Edinburgh, and co-founder and chief scientist at Scottish fintech Aveni. Alex, it's a real pleasure to have you with us. Would you like to introduce yourself?
Hi, I'm Michael. Thank you. Yes, delighted to be here. So I'm both a professor at the University of Edinburgh, where I have a group that's focused on reasoning and multilingual reasoning at scale. And I'm delighted to be able to bring the latest research into Aveni, both for building large language models and deploying them in industry.
Thank you. And since we're speaking about Aveni, we're lucky to also have their founder and CEO, Joseph, with us. Joseph, how are you?
Very good. Thank you, Mikael. Thanks for having us.
No problem. It's not your first time with us on the podcast, but please do introduce yourself and who you are to our audience.
Yeah, so I'm Alexi's dance partner. So we founded Aveni together over 5 years ago now. So I've spent 15 years working in the investment industry. Met Lexi, we founded Aveni together. So I bring the industry application, she brings the foundational knowledge of large language models, and together we've created this vertical AI business. We build models, agents and applications specifically for financial services.
Fabulous. Thank you very much. And we're also joined by Derek Shanks, technology platform lead at Lloyds Banking Group. Derek has over 20 years experience in technology roles in telco and finance. So we're looking forward to hearing from you. Derek, how are you? Thank you for joining us.
I'm good, thank you. So yes, just to introduce myself, Derek Shanks. As Mikael has said, I run one of our technology platforms at Lloyds Banking Group, specifically in the insurance, pensions and investments division, where I look after all of our digital channels that face our customers, our colleague channels that are used, of course, to help those customers, and the advisor channels used by our large network of independent financial advisors. We're already, particularly in those colleague channels, we're starting to use AI to power those experiences. So really looking forward to this discussion as we go even further with Agentic AI.
Great to have you with us. And finally, Rich Wilson from founder and CEO at Goiiged.ai. Rich, how are you? It's a pleasure to have you with us. Another fantastic fintech in Scotland.
Yes, thank you for having me. Goiiged.ai is a skills intelligence platform for enterprises. Really, in a very briefly, we use generative AI to break a job into tasks or a statement of work, if you want to be really specific. And then we take those tasks and those deliverables, and then we match them to different resource pools. So that resource pool could be an internal employee, it could be an external consultant or freelancer, or it could be, as we're seeing more and more, pre-built AI agents that companies have already built. So we don't build our own agents, but we help companies be able to figure out what is the best way to get that task done. And we're seeing a large increase in the amount of times that it's actually an agent that can do that task, or usually an agent and a human, right, to do that task. So we're coming at it from maybe a little bit of a different angle, because I said not a builder, but very much a matcher of those skills.
Fantastic. Well, we've got a great panel with us, so let's dive straight into the topic today. And I guess the first question for those listening to us that might not be familiar with the term Agentic AI, could one of you, and I'm thinking maybe Alex with your background as well at the university. Explain to us what Agentic AI is.
So it can mean a lot of different things, but in its simplest form, it's combining reasoning with actions. The very first paper on this, the React paper, suggested that we can separate these two components of using generative AI. So not just, to get it to understand and manipulate human language and produce output, but actually have the ability to act upon the world. And actually these tools, the actions it can take could be something like writing an email. It doesn't need to be that it has to access tools like, say, web search or RAG or, something very impactful. But conceptually, that framework has turned out to be very powerful. And ironically, some of the very best agentic platforms keep the very simplest sort of kind of interactions of agents, basically splitting out the sort of the reasoning and the acting. Of course, you can also layer on a lot of other important and interesting kind of features, such as memory and learning and automatic evaluation. There, you can add all of these to make the agentic framework more powerful. And also agents, can have different levels of, say, autonomy. So autonomy is something people talk a lot about with regards to agents. And depending on the application, there isn't really a clear line between, say, an LLM that can maybe write emails and a powerful autonomous agentic framework that has many, many tools. But there's this sort of continuum. And I think I'll leave it at that. So we can talk about other things too. And I'm happy if our other panelists have other ideas about defining agentic AI.
Absolutely. Anyone would want to add anything to that definition, which I thought was very good?
I think that's spot on. Yeah, maybe the one thing just to add is that I guess we've, to your point about the spectrum, Lexi, I think there's definitely been in the industry generally, and particularly in financial services, there's perhaps been a stretch with the word agentic and the autonomous end of that spectrum that Lexi's touched on, where I think there's been potentially a hype train towards fully autonomous agentic frameworks when they're perhaps not. So that'd be something interesting for us to get into on where we all are on that spectrum. I think it's fascinating. And there's definitely, it'd be good to cut through some of the hype to get to the reality with our panel here.
Very good. And I guess, well, to continue on that point, because Lexi, you mentioned emails, for example, that's something that Agentic AI could do. What are the most exciting applications that you guys have seen? And please feel free to mention your own application. I know Joseph and Rich, you've got obviously your own companies, but anything you've seen in the market out there, you're like, wow, that's fantastic. That's a real game changer.
Yeah, I guess, just building on what Derek said there, I've heard about 1 million agents and I've used about 10 so far. So we've in terms of things that are out there in the wild and making a difference right now, it's hard for me currently to look beyond like research agents. So if you want to find out detailed information from multiple different sources about a particular topic in a particular way, there are interesting agents like Manus or something like that can go through a step-by-step process, build a super detailed, interesting report, and then reason with you to make that report more refined, more better. And that's doing the work of multiple people, especially when you think about like research analysts and people of roles of that nature. So those things are not sensitive. You're going out using public sources of information. You're collating that information together in a specific format. And so you don't have the sort of restrictions that you may have or may need to consider if you want to put something in front of a client or something of that nature. So we've seen some really, really strong research agents out there, and that's exciting for now. I think looking forward, the answer to that question is completely different and is all about customer-facing, customer interacting agents.
Yeah, I would just add to that in terms of like some ones that I've used in my kind of day-to-day and probably similar to to Joseph in terms of, there's millions, but I'd probably use at 10 to 12. But the ones that have actually had the most value to me as a user have been pretty basic, So the one that I use every day that has actually worked, and I was very cynical about it, has been Fixer AI, a London-based startup. It's, as Lexi mentioned about email, so it's in an email. I got hundreds of emails a day. I've realised that I was spending a lot of time on email management. So that is into my email. It's also an AI note taker, but I don't use it for that functionality because I don't like it. But what it does do is it summarizes my emails much better than Google or Microsoft can, and it will craft a response, and it will craft a response on how I've responded to other emails. And as basic as that is, now doesn't send those. It's not fully autonomous, right? I would never let it be fully autonomous and send them, because a few times it does hallucinate and make stuff up. But because it responded to a client or to someone the other day saying, we work with these 3 clients, and we've never even talked to those 3 clients. So how we could work with them? One of them was BT. We've never even talked to BT. How they're a client. But I have saved probably 10 hours. I would say 10 to 12 hours a week based on that tool. And then the other example, which is not even an agent, but super basic, has been creating my own custom GPT through ChatGPT and training it on the task base and the deep research. So every day we have 12 active enterprise clients we work with. Part of the being able to continue grow those is knowing what's going on in those companies. So it gives me an update at 6 o'clock every morning, and it tells me exactly what's been going on in the news, any new hires that they've made, and everything else. I said I wouldn't say it's fully autonomous. It's really just working on a task and deep research, but it has a big impact. It's really basic, but those 2 things, email and researching our clients, is probably saving me combined, as I said, probably 15 hours a week to do other stuff. So pretty basic agent, but again, I've definitely added some value to my kind of day-to-day life trying to run a company.
Very impressive, and maybe it can read into the future, because as you know, one of our partners is BT, so we might make an intro after
maybe
this call. And
nice segue.
Exactly. But can I come to you, Derek? Because we spoke about just now some great examples of use of Agentic AI, but in the financial services space, as in any regulatory environment, we obviously need to be careful because we're dealing with people's money. Or it could be people in financial difficulties, or people in other type of difficulty, people being vulnerable. So what are the kind of implications of using those models when it comes to the customer? What are you, on a day-to-day type basis, what are your thoughts about Agentic AI replacing humans in the kind of customer journey?
So I think that there's a few angles to this, I guess. In terms of it replacing humans, first and foremost, we absolutely are continuing to keep the human in the loop in this space, without a doubt, because of course it is very sensitive. There's the regulatory implications, but of course the ethical implications as well, and the potential harm to a customer. And so that's absolutely critical to us. I guess with starting to move into the agentic world with AI, really it's about how you test and learn from that. So you need to be very careful that you shouldn't have your first ever use case with an agent shouldn't really be customer facing. You should test and learn internally, of course, keeping that human in the loop, and then building out from that as you do test and learn and move into a customer facing use case. Where of course there's a huge power here to solve some of the financial challenges we have in the communities that we work with. I think it's about setting the right boundaries, setting the guardrails for that, whether they be broad boundaries where you're willing to have some autonomy, or whether those be very specific kind of regional or industry specific boundaries. I think it's about the governance and guardrails within the organization as well. Like, we can't even begin to look at an AI use case without going through, of course, our AI governance ethics committee, where we've everyone involved, from our AI experts to our legal teams to our regulatory teams. And it always starts with that customer first mindset in terms of what is the problem we're trying to solve, rather than just trying to take a human out of something. But I think there it's not for me so much about taking the human away. It's about empowering the customer to make their own decisions instead of needing to spend more of their hard-earned cash with a human being. Thinking about financial advice, we're clearly not there yet, and there's a lot going on in the industry with the regulator to look at this and to figure out where we go on that boundary between guidance and advice, and of course targeted support with some draft rules just announced this week. But I think that's where there's huge potential with the right governance, with the right ethics and controls and human in the loop, to actually put these things in the hands of people that couldn't previously afford them.
Yeah, so bridging that advice gap in the UK, which is really paramount for helping everyone. And I guess, so that's the customer facing element of it. But when it comes to maybe back-end processes, like credit risk management and debt management, do you see those tools bringing something else to the party and making the financial services sector better and maybe more inclusive through the use of more data or the kind of digesting data a bit better than human can do?
Yeah, now credit risk is definitely not an area of expertise for me, but if I maybe pick on like economic crime prevention and fraud controls and so on, I think that's where it can really help make the right decisions faster. How much autonomy we'd want to give to it, again, is something that needs to be carefully considered throughout. But moving from traditional machine learning models for fraud prevention to something that can be far more personalised, based on an AI agent making those decisions, then yes, we can clearly protect customers faster in those circumstances.
Lexi, you could maybe tell us about, through the research that you've done and your work at Aveni, the main challenges that you've seen financial institutions face when integrating, AI, or how they're going about addressing them.
So I'm sure Derek would have some ideas there as well. From our perspective, a huge difficulty has always been data, getting realistic data that represents the AI tasks, getting enough of it, getting governance over the data and making sure that it's not just clean and reliable, but also, doesn't expose private information. Another challenge is evaluation, because we're not just, the outputs are often not just like a classification. So, they can be long texts, and it's difficult to know exactly what quality the output is, and finding cases where the outputs are incorrect or hallucinate can be quite subtle. So all in all, I think generative AI is challenging for large financial institutions to implement. We've all been used to having quite deterministic processes when it comes to software engineering, and we're moving into a new realm now with it's almost like more human-like processes where, if you're dealing with humans, you're expecting them, to be clever and reason and do things quite well and be somewhat autonomous in some ways. But clearly, also humans are non-deterministic and can have outputs you're not expecting. And so I think the challenge will be going forward is kind of taking our sort of understanding of how one manages risk on non-deterministic humans and how to apply that to large language model outputs and agents. And I think that's the way how we're going to be able to actually have more impactful AI applications that aren't very low risk, aren't just sort of co-pilots, and give them more autonomy and more agency. Yeah.
So sort of
Very
like building on that, Mikhail. So the regulations don't change for an agent. You still need good customer outcomes within the confines of consumer duty. You still need to be able to identify vulnerable customers and treat them appropriately. So irrespective of the technology used or the mode of engagement, the regulatory requirements remain the same. So you need to superimpose the observability, the control that you have over your human workforce, over your digital workforce. And I think this thinking's still yet to be done in earnest by the regulator, because information moves differently within that digital network of agents than it does across a process with control and governance layers for humans. And understanding where something might go wrong, or when to bring a human in the loop in a complex network of agents and humans, especially at the scale of an organization like Lloyds or large national firms, is a super, super challenging problem. So the level of comfort you need to introduce autonomous agents into that complex decision space is very high. And I think this is really an area of focus for a lot of thinking in this space at the moment. What is the burden of proof, the mode of assurance that the regulator will need for an agent to execute a regulated activity versus just supply a human with additional automation or additional information? And it's a very interesting space at the moment.
So also touching on like things like transparency as well, and that was very interesting. I was using O3 on ChatGPT for the first time the other day, and it tells you what it's thinking, explains the reasoning as well as writing at the same time, which is fascinating to see how the model can approach a certain problem.
But the chain of thought expressed via the agent is a chain of thought between an agent and a consumer. So when you personalize the journey between an agent and a consumer, you personalize the risk. Well, was that chain of thought correct? Was the outcome correct? So you can no longer take a sample-based view and infer control from a population, because each individual journey between an agent and customer can have different outcomes. And that will be tightly controlled by guardrails, but there will be edge cases, and at scale are compounded through network layers. It's a really interesting challenge because it flips the regulatory principles around the cross-cutting principles around transparency, accountability, model risk. These things no longer apply in the same way when you consider agents executing regulated activity.
That's very interesting, because obviously you speak about hyper-personalization here, and when it comes to the regulator, then in terms of reporting to the regulator, it's going to need to be hyper-personalized as well to explain every little decision that you've made, which means that probably would need agent to do that as well, and to make it efficient for the regulator. A question for Derek is around maybe the way large financial institutions look at those new technologies. Do you see that as being so disruptive that it's actually putting your companies at risk with new entrants, or do you see that as an opportunity to actually work with some of those very innovative solutions or innovative companies like Goiiged or Aveni? Because I think there should be a certain level of collaborations, but what's the general feeling for the sector, if you wish?
I think it absolutely is about that partnership, and if I can even extend that partnership not just to our startups and scale-ups, but to our academic institutions as well. And that's a perfect example, in fact, of what we've been doing with Aveni. I'm sure Lexi and Joseph won't mind me mentioning that not only have we invested in Aveni, but partnering with them with an LLM, which I'm sure they will talk about more eloquently than I would, but actually bringing the University of Edinburgh, which is on the doorstep of both of our organisations in Scotland, and working together with them, because I think it not only does it help with that disruption, and instead of viewing it as a threat, it helps us partner on it and work together on it and leverage the scale of an organisation like Lloyds Banking Group together with the innovation coming through organisations like that of Joseph's and Lexi's. But I think it's also looking to other industries. That's what academia and in fact other startups can bring to it, looking beyond the traditional financial services boundaries and actually pushing us to think a little bit differently with it. So that partnership is absolutely critical to it.
And Rich, can I come to you? I mean, we're almost at the end of the episode, but I need to address this point, and we've mentioned before, AI replacing humans or working together. And you've mentioned that one of the latest development of your platform is to be able to look at agent as resource the same way you would look at humans as resource in organizations. What's your view on the future of the kind of job market? What are the data that you're looking at showing at the minute?
Yeah, controversial question to end it, Michael. Look, I think there is no doubt that there is an impact. Now, companies are looking to do things differently. So if you look at full-time permanent job placements have been in the decline for the last 36 quarters, right? So, and the companies are making large-scale redundancies. Look at Microsoft this week, another round, right? So, like, there's no doubt the job market is different as it ever has been. And I think to say it's not changing and it's going to be all right, I think is naive at best, right? It's definitely changing. And if you look at certain skill sets, there is much less demand. Like, I shared this example before, but when we started our platform, the number one skill that was required, what was asked for, was a copywriter, right? Companies building prototypes, and they need a copywriter to write the copy for the product. You know, you don't see them anymore. We don't get a demand for them. Copywriters still exist, right? But the demand for them has reduced massively. So a lot of them have reskilled into UX design and UI design and other skills. We've seen a lot of demand for content creation, blogs, thought leadership. That has reduced massively. But on the other side, again, our number one skill required is a data analyst, right? Data quality. That's been through the roof. There's a lot more demand. There's a lot more demand for software developers. I know people say you don't need them anymore with Codex and Replit and Lovable, but the demand is still there. So I think the job market is 100% changing, and there are definitely tasks that AI can do. But I believe, to what Derek said, I think human in the loop is still key. We're not all being replaced, but we are going through a huge shift. I've been a big talker about the freelance economy for a while, or the gig economy, hence the name Goiiged.ai. But the gig economy is growing. Right? It's $2.7 trillion right now. Right? It is growing by over 30% a year. How we work is changing, and the demand for full-time roles is definitely reducing. But do we still need people? Absolutely. So that's my very short synopsis.
A bit of positive too. And anyone wants to add anything on that specific topic?
Incredibly hopeful about the jobs of the future. I think that humans are absolutely critical to understand the problems, understand the landscapes, and what's needed to be done, and who needs to be connected and talked to in order to get it done. And I think these agentic tools are going to massively reduce the boring routine road work. It's going to lead to opportunities for far better products and far cheaper service. And if we can manage the risks and govern them well, I think they can be a force for good.
Exactly. And building on what Derek said earlier, especially in that sort of financial advice, financial guidance space, this is the perfect place to look at, because you're talking about an underserved market that has 10 million, 12 million people that have a need for, yet don't get advice or a service in that space. And this presents an opportunity to reach out to those people with an economically viable proposition for the first time. So there are lots of spaces like that where gaps are being filled, which are super encouraging. But as Rich was saying, the job space is really, we feel it internally. We feel the need for different skill sets evolving continually. So yeah, it is changing, but there's lots of encouraging aspects to look out for as well.
That's great. Well, it was a real pleasure to discuss this topic with you, Alexandra, Derek, Rich, and Joseph. So thank you for your time today. Really, really appreciate it. I hope if you've been listening, you've enjoyed the conversation, and that you'll subscribe to listen to our previous 4 seasons, as well as all the future episodes. So once again, from FinTech Scotland, thank you for listening, and speak to you soon.
Thanks, Mikhail. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you
very much, Mikhail.